A single mother stumbles into a billionaire's hidden war. One mistake, unlocking secrets powerful enough to shatter empires. If anyone ever told you that a newborn's cry is nothing more than the mewing of a kitten, they've clearly never been trapped in a pitch-black apartment at midnight with a baby screaming for milk until his throat goes raw. That sound, dear listener, isn't some harmless whimper. It's like a drunk country guitarist strumming out of tune, offbeat, broken, yet strong enough to make your chest rattle like a drum. That night belonged to Mira Jensen, a single mother, her hair a wild nest blown by the storm, holding her son, Noah, as he howled for milk like he was suing the whole world for injustice. Streetlight bled through the cracked window, breaking into fragments of gold on the cold tile floor. The kitchen was so quiet she could hear the water pipe moan, and the refrigerator breathe like a heavyweight boxer out of gas. The power had been cut that afternoon. Utility companies don't bundle compassion into their bills. Mira sat on the floor, knees pulled tight to her chest, a child's flimsy blanket wrapped around her shoulders like the cloak of a poor knight. On the shelf, an empty can of formula lay belly up, mocking her. From the bedroom, Noah's wail cut sharp as a train horn across her chest. Tonight's bottle was mostly water, and water doesn't fill a baby's stomach. Children are the harshest realists. They don't care about payday or the price of gas. They only care if milk flows on schedule. Tonight it didn't, and Noah filed his protest with the full authority of a 20-pound citizen. Okay, Mama's here," Mira whispered, patting him in rhythm with her frantic heartbeat. Her eyes drifted back to the can. Still empty. Pride, if weighed against a hungry child, is lighter than a dry leaf. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone. The screen glowed green in the dark, like a cat's eye. In her contacts sat the name Ben, her brother, who had bailed her out before, always with the tired patience of a saint tallying up favors. Mira hated asking, but when stacked against a baby's empty stomach, dignity was cheap currency. She typed, "Ben, I'm sorry to bother you again. I need $50 for Noah's formula. I'll pay you Friday when my check comes. Please." Her fingers shook like a guitar string as she hit send. She didn't double-check the number, didn't reread the words. She set the phone down, pressed her forehead to her knees, and waited. The kind of waiting that lasts only 5 minutes, but feels wide enough to hold a forest of worry. The phone buzzed. Mira jerked upright, unlocked it. On the screen, "I think you sent this to the wrong number. People say a wrong step can send you miles off course." Mira mistyped one digit and lost the shore. She blinked hard, her cheeks burning, and typed quickly, "Sorry, wrong number. Please ignore." She locked the phone and pushed it away like it might explode, then pulled the blanket tighter. Another failure stacked neatly atop the old ones. They kept an orderly queue. The phone buzzed again. A calm question. "Is your baby okay?" Mira squinted. Strangers usually delete. Some might scold. But what stranger asks something soft, like fresh bread out of the oven? The world, in her experience, didn't often manufacture such questions. She hesitated, then typed, "We'll manage. Sorry again. I can help. No strings attached." If you've ever crossed a desert and thought you saw an oasis, you know the beauty that terrifies. Mira read the words, "No strings attached," twice, then laughed, dry, cracked, meant to cover up the choke in her throat. In this life, what doesn't have strings? Fish are hooked by line. Favors are bound by debt. "Thank you, but I don't take money from strangers," she wrote. "Smart," came the reply. "My name's Jackson. Guess I'm not a stranger anymore. Even the wisest skid on a slick corner. That name, Jackson, appeared on her screen like a small boat drifting down a dark river. A name she had, but no face, no man. Mira set the phone aside, lifted Noah from his crib, and paced the kitchen. Bare feet touched the cold tile, and she shivered. The air was laced with the stale tang of old milk, the metallic rust from the faucet, and the mildew of damp fabric. A mix of smells some desperate researcher could probably build a thesis on. Noah tired, his cries thinning into hiccuped sobs, like a fish gulping air. Mira looked at him, then at her reflection swaying in the window. And suddenly, she did the very thing she'd sworn an hour ago was madness. She sent her Venmo info to the man named Jackson. 3 seconds later, her phone chimed. The number glowed cold as steel, hot as fire, $5,000. Mira froze, as if doused by both boiling and ice water at once. She checked again, logged out, logged back in. The number remained stone solid on the screen. Too much, she typed, her words stumbling. I only needed 50. The reply was instant. It's yours. No conditions, just one less worry. They say women's tears fall like summer rain, sudden, gone just as quick. But Mira hadn't cried when she lost her job, hadn't cried when the repo truck hauled her only car away, like roots yanked from soil, hadn't cried when the man who promised her the moon disappeared the moment he heard pregnant. Yet now, staring at this tiny screen with that enormous number, she broke down like a child robbed of her favorite toy. Not for the money, for the feeling that the back carrying all the weight finally had a steady hand pressed to it, light but firm. A new message lit up. You don't need to say anything. Just take care of Noah. Mira's breath caught. She had never once mentioned her son's name. Outside the window, the darkness seemed thicker, but inside her chest, a small lamp flickered on, accompanied by one sharp question. Who is this man? At dawn, when the sky was still a deep indigo like the bottom of an inkwell, a knock sounded at the door. In this building, a knock was as rare as an octopus strolling on dry land. Mira fumbled with her oversized coat, peeking through the peephole. A delivery man stood there in a blue uniform holding a scanner and several cartons as big as hope itself. Delivery for Mira Jensen, he read, his voice as casual as if he were reciting street signs. Yes, that's me. He handed her the pen and pointed to the line. Mira scrawled her name, wondering if she had just signed something far bigger than a few packages. Maybe a contract with fate. When the door shut, she dragged the boxes onto the floor and opened them one by one. Formula, diapers, baby wipes, bottles. Brand new clothes still smelling of cotton. Poets might call it the scent of early clouds, but mothers know it as payday in fabric form. At the bottom of the last box, an envelope. The boy should have enough. Noah deserves more than scraps. J, no logo, no return address, no phone number, just a handful of words, handwritten neat and sharp, like setting a paper boat down on a stream and letting it drift away. Mira sank to the floor, clutching the envelope, her heart swinging between gratitude and suspicion. She laid Noah against her chest. The baby sniffled once, then sank into deep sleep after his first full feeding of real formula. His breathing was steady, like a tiny sewing machine stitching peace into her skin. She didn't dare move, afraid to break the fragile quiet. The living room brightened with a thin, milky light slipping through torn curtains. The air was filled with the scent of fresh paper, powdered milk, and old paint, all blended into what could only be called the fragrance of hope in a poor home. Strange perhaps, but in truth, it was one of the purest smells, the smell of a day that might be different. Mira placed Noah down gently, walked to the table, and opened her phone. Into the search bar she typed, Jackson Albright. Like a snap of fingers, results flooded the screen. Jackson Albright, CEO of Helix Court Industries, estimated net worth $11.8 billion, reclusive with the press, former military, widower, childless. There were 3 official photos, one in profile, his eyes cold as a January sky, one striding out of a hearing, jaw set, the last in front of a corporate backdrop, his smile thin as a pencil-sharpening blade. Mira swallowed hard. He wasn't just rich. He was capital R rich. The kind of man who lived in another atmosphere, riding an elevator built for destiny itself. Why would someone who breathed that rarefied air knock on her door? The screen lit with a new message. Because once, someone helped me for no reason at all. I don't forget. Mira set the phone down, her heartbeat like a knock inside her chest. She typed back, I don't want pity, not pity, recognition. Some sentences weigh more than anchors. His reply pulled her little boat of suspicion closer to shore. She leaned her head back against the wall, closed her eyes for a moment, then typed, How do you know my baby's name? Oh, pause stretched for several breaths. Then, you typed it in your first message. Mira scrolled back. He was right. She had written, Noah's almost out of formula in that desperate text meant for Ben. Relief and embarrassment flushed through her. Sometimes, the devils we sketch in our heads are nothing more than our own shadows. Do you have work? His next text asked, sudden as a gust sneaking through a crack. I did, once, but the company went under. The cheap daycare shut down. So, no. What field? Biochemistry, mostly diagnostics. I once interned at Novagen years ago. Now I'm good at washing dishes, brewing coffee, and filing taxes I can't afford to pay. A moment later, tomorrow, 11 a.m. Come to Helix Core, ask for Ava. No conditions, just a conversation. You're offering me a job? Offering you a chance to get one back. Mira looked at Noah. Her son sleeping sweetly, his mouth pursed as if dreaming of an endless river of milk. She turned to the window where the sun was prying shadows off the rooftops. Mr. Albright thought you might feel more comfortable knowing your son was safe and cared for, Ava said, her tone warm yet professional. You can leave him here. I'll be nearby. Mira lowered her head, whispering thanks, then laid Noah gently in the crib. He shifted, lips puckering, and slipped deeper into sleep. Seeing him so calm lightened part of her, but the rest weighed heavier, because the next door would lead her to the man named Jackson. The meeting didn't take place in some grand hall, but in a small conference room flooded with natural light from glass walls. Jackson was already there. No suit, no tie, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The sunlight caught in his hair, glinting silver. He looked up when Mira walked in, eyes sharp yet tired. He gave a small nod. Mira? She froze. Strange, hearing her name spoken by a man like this. I wasn't sure I should come, she admitted. But you did. A faint smile flickered across his face, brief and rare. And that's what matters. Mira pulled out a chair and sat across from him, her hands clenched together under the table to hide their trembling. I owe you a thank you, she said. Number you owe me nothing. His voice was low, steady. I don't believe in rescues. I believe in investing in people. Mira gave a bitter laugh. People like me? An unemployed single mom living in a rundown apartment, trying to keep her kid fed? You call that an investment? Exactly, Jackson replied. I believe someone like you won't sink if given a life raft. You'll swim. And I need people who swim. The air went still for a beat. Sunlight washed over Mira's face, highlighting the shadows under her eyes and the cracks in her lips. She didn't know whether to trust him or laugh in his face. In her mind, a wry Mark Twain voice muttered, "If a rich man says he believes in you, be careful. He might just need a witness for his next con." But Jackson's eyes were different. They weren't the eyes of a man trying to trick her. They were the eyes of someone who'd been tricked too many times before. Eyes carrying a sadness she couldn't quite name. They talked for a long time. Jackson asked about her old job, about biochemistry, about her internship at Novagen. Mira answered cautiously, suspicion never far away. But little by little she realized he was actually listening. Not the polite nodding kind of listening, but the kind meant to understand. At last, he slid a thin folder across the table. "I'd like you to try something. 3 months. Internal financial support. Flexible hours. You can work remotely or bring your son with you. If it doesn't fit, you leave. No strings." Mira opened it, her eyes darting to the salary line. They widened. The number was half a year's income at her old job. This is real?" she asked. "Real," he said simply. She gripped the folder tighter. In her head, voices clashed, the cautious one warning it was a trap, the hopeful one whispering it was a way out, and her own bitter voice sneering, "See? A wrong number text can end up in a 6-figure contract. Life loves to prank us in extravagant ways." Mira looked up. "I'll try." On her first day, she wore an old button-down and a blazer gone threadbare. Her jeans fit tighter than before, but still wearable. She walked into Helix Core with Noah in his stroller. The strangest part was, nobody stared at her with pity or curiosity. People smiled, greeted her, as though she'd belonged there all along. Ava led her to a small office, bright and airy. Through the glass wall, she could see Noah in the playroom. On her desk, 2 monitors glowed with the company's internal system. Mira set her hands on the keyboard. It felt like touching an old instrument she hadn't played in years, yet somehow still remembered every key. She began combing through the records, cross-checking figures. Numbers and notes danced across the screen. And then, something odd surfaced. One strange transaction, then another. And another. Small, precise, but misaligned with the real books. Someone was hiding something. Mira bit her lip. Only 1 day in, and she'd stumbled onto something off. She logged the notes, saved the files, and kept digging. The more she looked, the clearer it became. There was a hand siphoning money from inside the company. A hand that knew the system well enough to use it as its own cover. At noon, Jackson walked in. No knock. He glanced at her screen, his brow furrowing. "You found it faster than I thought." "You already suspected?" Mira asked. "I had doubts, but no one ever pinned it down. You just did." She leaned back, heart racing. "So what happens now?" Jackson met her eyes, his gaze like steel. "Now we find the truth, quietly. If the wrong people know, it all explodes." In the days that followed, Mira worked like a honeybee. She typed and calculated while Noah laughed and cried in the playroom beyond the glass, every sound keeping her balanced on a tightrope. Each wrong digit, each hidden account, felt like scissors poised to cut that rope. But she didn't stop. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't just surviving. She had purpose. She uncovered payments split into fragments, funneled through multiple accounts, finally landing in a shell company in Delaware. The name on the documents, Trinox Solutions. The shell was elaborate, but to someone who knew the field, the cracks still showed. One night, she sat before the glowing screen, her face pale in the light. She saved everything, copied it onto a separate drive. Her heart pounded because she knew she was holding something bigger than a job, something big enough to change the fate of the company and her own life. Night settled over Helix Core, the building hushed and nearly empty. Only a few silhouettes remained in the offices. Mira stepped into the playroom, watched Noah sleep, then dropped into a chair and buried her face in her hands. A bitter laugh escaped. So this is it. From a mom begging for $50, I've become the woman about to blow open a $1 million fraud case. If Mark Twain were alive, he'd slap his knee and write something like, "When life throws you a ball, beware. It might just have a bomb inside." A new door had opened, but no one knew if it led to paradise or a pit. If you've ever walked through a glass tower in the early morning while the night still lingers in the air, you'll know what Mira Jensen felt stepping out of the elevator on the 37th floor. The AC wheezed like a tired bull. The carpet cushioned her feet, but crunched faintly with invisible dust, and the sunlight sliced into thin blades across the desks. The city below rushed like a river of fish, but up here everything moved by keystrokes and cryptic nods. They called it professional environment. I prefer to call it grown-ups playing house, because everyone pretends to be calm while their hearts pound like a marching band. Mira arrived a beat earlier than her alarm. Noah was in the glass playroom next door, clutching a stuffed giraffe and delivering the most important speeches of his young life. Baba, Lala, complete with statesman-like gestures. His mother, meanwhile, wore cheap headphones, drowning her numbers in lo-fi beats bland as oatmeal, but good enough to make the data dance quietly. Through the glass, a slant of morning light cut across the carpet, half warm, half cold. They say morning light cures fatigue, but only if you're not buried under a pile of bills squatting on your back. The work itself was simple. Log in, pull the data, cross-check. But inside Mira's head, it was like running a corner store while a stranger poured out their life story, half suspicious, half curious, always ready to slam the counter. She read each expense line the way her mother once read the lines of a palm. Those lines don't lie if you lean close enough. "I'm only a temp," she reminded herself, like a ferryman muttering, "The water's shallow. Just row." But the numbers weren't temporary. Left unwatched, they bred. First came the tiny payments, polite as men tipping their hats. $1,180, $2,240, $1,960. All below the threshold for internal review, like fish slim enough to slip the net. The vendor names were too neat, too polite. Trinox Solutions LLC, as if they could fix everything from leaky pipes to broken marriages. But their address? Just a mailbox in a strip of self-serve units. I told you before, when someone sells you solutions but no real name stands behind it, sometimes what they're really solving is your wallet. Mira printed a summary. The fresh ink smelled like the first promise of a season. The printer hissed, as if scolding her. Trouble already this early? She underlined a few lines, circled a column. Her shoulders dropped, like a kite catching a good draft. That was the action. The inner layer? A memory wrinkled like an old receipt. Her mother keeping the family ledger, lying awake if even a couple dollars went missing. Small money is real money, her mother used to say, not those numbers dancing on TV. At 10 to 8, Ava Lynn appeared, elegant as a cat gliding across a banquet table without spilling a spoon. "Black coffee? No sugar," she said, setting it down, the aroma thin as morning mist. "Noah doing okay?" "Better than me," Mira smiled. "He just gave his first major address on giraffe sovereignty." Ava laughed, then tilted her head at the growing stack of papers. "My, you've built a whole jungle already." "Just dust," Mira said, "but enough dust makes a jungle." Ava looked like she wanted to say something else, then held it back. She had a way of keeping words in her mouth the way fishermen keep bait on the hook. Not thrown, not swallowed, just enough to make the fish think it's real. At 6 minutes past 9, the door opened quietly. Jackson Albright stepped in. No fanfare, no brass band. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a faint scratch on his wrist that the office lights seemed intent on exposing. He glanced once at Noah, the way someone checks the water just to make sure it's still there, then turned to Mira. "Good morning." "If by good you mean uneventful," Mira shrugged, "then no." Jackson didn't sit. He stood just behind her shoulder, far enough to be polite, close enough to read the screen. The smell of new plastic from the keyboard mingled with the faint trace of wood from his shirt, like a house nobody had ever lived in for long. "What do you see?" he asked, voice low as a pencil line across paper. "Raindrops," Mira said. "Not loud, not heavy, but without a roof. The house gets soaked." "And our roof?" "Some beams are rotting." He paused, listening like a hunter catching the rustle of leaves. "Keep this between us," he said softly. "No emails, no cloud backups. I want everything to walk, not ride the elevator." "Then I'll go barefoot," Mira nodded. "Let me break in here with a thought. People love to believe they steer the ship of destiny. Most of the time, we're just arranging the chairs so the wind doesn't blow them over. Jackson seemed to know that better than most. He didn't promise, didn't threaten. He handed out silence the way folks hand out salt, sparingly, but without it, the dish is ruined. Mira slid a small USB into Jackson's laptop, her private compass. The hum of the fan filled the room, like an old sage blowing out a dying candle. When the log files appeared, Jackson tilted his head. His brows met for a heartbeat, then loosened. "Too clean," he murmured. "Clean like a pair of shoes that just trudged through mud without a speck left on them." "Because the man wearing them knows where to wash," Mira answered, pointing to a line of device IDs. "All the approvals are different hands, but they all come from the same access point. Like a dozen signatures, but one pen. And where's that pen?" "In the pocket of someone with the basement keys," Mira said. And with that line, both of them heard the clock tick into a new moment. The day stretched like a taffy pull, sticky and long. Mira set aside the small transactions she had already photographed and moved on to mapping the flow of money. She drew arrows, circled figures, slapped sticky notes on the wall. Suddenly, the room looked like the classroom of a tired teacher lecturing Ethics 101. At each arrow, she asked herself, who benefits? Who's behind this? And why do the numbers choose this path and not another? On the other side of the glass, Noah dozed, his mouth parted like a comma, the comma of a life story not yet ready for its period. Inside Mira, emotions tangled like barbed wire. Fear, because her name was tied to Noah's milk and bread. Anger, because someone was stealing from the common pot like a thief snatching the last piece of candy from a child. And strangely, a spark of excitement, thin as the last ray of sun, at the sense of touching an old instrument and hearing it still play. She wasn't just working to keep a chair warm. She was working because, for the first time in ages, her eyes had something bigger to do than scan overdue bills. After lunch, roast chicken lightly salted and neat rows of vegetables, the kind of meal delivered to people too busy to indulge. Mira opened her notebook. On the first page she wrote her mother saying, "Never go to bed with a number out of place." Beneath it, she added her own, "And never let anyone lull you with the word procedure." Dear reader, here's a truth glass towers hate to admit. Guilt loves to look clean. It wears pressed shirts, shakes hands politely, and always arrives on time for meetings. It adores the word procedure, because that word is a thick blanket to smother the sour smell of conscience. Mira, thanks to her life, thanks to her scars, had smelled worse than that, and she wasn't so easily fooled. That afternoon she filtered through the system logs. Every time a Trinox payment appeared, a faint mark lit up in the access records. The same device address, the same IP range, always during the moments when the finance team shifted shifts or slipped into meetings. Whoever it was knew exactly when the room was empty. A famous thief in literature once taught, "Don't break the lock, use the landlord's key." It seemed someone inside Helix had studied well. She printed out her findings, slid them into a manila folder as if preserving sheet music. As she rose, Noah stirred awake, rubbing his eyes, reaching for her arms. "All right, General," she whispered, lifting him. The scent of warm milk, baby powder, and his body's heat filled her arms. Fragrances powerful enough to make an angry army sit down in peace. Her heart slowed back to normal. She kissed his soft hair. It felt like kissing a new leaf breaking from its bud. When Mira returned to her desk, Jackson was leaning in the doorway. He didn't knock. Some people knock because they fear disturbing. Others don't knock because they fear hearing a too clear "come in." Jackson was the latter. "Shall we talk?" he asked. The small meeting room next door had a west-facing window where the sun slid down like a hot coin off someone's palm, spilling copper light across the white walls. The city noise below shrank as though sealed in a box. Mira spread her papers across the table, the lines of ink forming a dark road through many turns. Jackson stood still, watching, eyes carrying the weariness of a man who had lived too long on alert, who didn't dare close them fully, even in sleep. "When did you start suspecting?" Mira asked. Outwardly, it was a question. Inwardly, she was weighing whether she had stepped into an open field or a desert. "Since winter," Jackson said. "When we canceled a project, but the expenses kept growing. I asked for a review. They told me it was transitional costs. I asked for reconciliation. They said reporting season. You know, this city has 100 ways to rename a hole and still convince you it's a road." "And Trinox?" "The name's like a cheap raincoat. Durable, forgettable. No one remembers where they bought it." Mira nodded. "I need deeper access, not to break anything, just to hear the server breathe. Device logs, shift schedules, the list of who can grant exceptions. I won't march with a torch. Just carry a candle." Jackson didn't hesitate. "Ava will arrange it, and Mira—" He paused. Sunset cut across his jaw, exposing the grit of a man who had bitten down through grief. "If you ever decide to walk away, I won't blame you. Some battles scare even their generals." "My son and I have fought invoices," Mira said with a half-smile. "What bullet from your CFO could hurt worse than that?" Half a joke, half truth. And let me tell you, dear reader, courage has a credit limit, like a card. But every now and then, pride hides in your pocket, while the instinct to do what's right runs straight into traffic, waving for the world to stop. That night, as the city changed clothes, from office gray to neon black, Mira brought Noah back to their apartment. The hallway smelled of fried potatoes from the neighbor's kitchen, mixed with the cigarette smoke of the man next door. The cheap perfume of the era. In the kitchen, the yellow bulb flickered, nodding like a weary man refusing to sleep. Mira warmed water, steam curling over her hand, as she mixed the formula. Noah drank greedily, his eyes sparkling as though he had caught the tail of a comet. When he finally slept, she opened her old laptop, fired up the VPN, and slipped back into the system like a night fisherman casting into familiar waters. She wasn't there to download anything, just to listen, to hear the logs murmur like a stream, hoping for the odd splash of a stone rolling loose. And there it was. Each time Trinox took its cut, there was a faint ping in the system's backlot, a tiny script hiding under the name Cleanup Temp. Life is like that. Anything labeled cleanup often hides the real dirt. She noted the times and compared them with the shift changes. The matches were perfect, like schools of mullet swimming in formation, always between minute 37 and 49 of the hour. Superstition, maybe. Someone believing in secret numbers. But Mira knew better. Smart thieves choose rhythms that become invisible once people get used to them. She smiled to herself. Thank you for your consistency, stranger. Character is the most loyal traitor. Past midnight, the wind whistled through the cracks like a bad flute player. Mira shut her laptop and stood at the window. Down on the street, red and green lights took turns teaching the lesson poorly. She remembered her days in Novagin's lab, the smell of ethanol, the hum of cold storage, the thrill of seeing a perfectly straight line on a readout for the first time. Back then, the world felt like a frozen field waiting for the first footprints. Then, the project was cut, the company sold, and her life shoved into a detour. She thought even her memory of that place had been liquidated like the old centrifuges, but it had only been hibernating. By night, the office was only her and the whisper of rain. Ava messaged, "Don't stay up too late. Tomorrow you'll need to be quiet, but deep." Mira replied, "Deep means cold." Ava typed back, "But at the bottom there's always rock to stand on." Women have a way of telling each other, "Don't be afraid. I'm here," without ever saying it outright. Noah woke once more, asking for water. Mira carried him on her hip, patting his back, listening to the tiny clogged sound of his breath, like leaves brushing in the wind. She told herself, "If I fail tomorrow, at least tonight my boy will sleep well." That's the philosophy of people with no stake in million-dollar meetings. Their victory is measured in small peace, not fireworks. Thursday morning, the halls of Helix smelled of fresh oranges from the cleaning crew, scrubbing as though preparing for dignitaries. In truth, they were preparing for rumors. And rumors, dear reader, are the fastest currency in any office economy. No banks needed, only mouths. Mira passed through, catching snippets, investigation, audit, CFO. She kept her steps steady, not fast, not slow, like someone carrying a bowl of water, determined not to spill a drop. In the playroom, Noah sat with the caregiver, chewing on applesauce. He bit the spoon like a tiny philosopher contemplating the sharp edges of life. Mira kissed his forehead quickly, then returned to her desk. On her screen, the data map had taken shape like a river. She named it in her head. Ink River. Each Tranox payment was a small dam. Stealing water meant for the fields. Jackson called her into his office. His room glowed softly. No trophies on the walls, only a black and white photo. A still lake, a lone boat in the center. "See?" Mira asked. "Lake," Jackson said. "From long ago. The past needs few words, silence fills in the rest." He pointed to a chair. "Ava set up what you asked for. You can review 6 months of access changes." Mira opened the logs. Data flowed like a June rainstorm. At line 19, she stopped. A temporary override granted to the CFO's assistant, justification listed as preparing internal audit for the quarter. The timing matched the very first Trinox payment. A chill brushed her skin. Not fear, justice sprouting, a rare tree rarely tended. "What do you see?" Jackson asked. "A detonation point," Mira said. "Not big, but enough to shred a tire." She gathered the documents, sealed them in a thick plastic sleeve. "I want to cross-check with security device logs. If the same device approved these, we have a fingerprint." "Do it," Jackson said. And thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Mira replied. "So far I've only seen the shadow on the water, not the hand holding the oar." The security floor sat beside the elevator control hub. There, the beep of key cards pulsed steady like the heartbeat of the building. The supervisor was a woman with curly hair, named Rivera, eyes sharp as pins. "What do you need?" "Device logs from financial approvals," Mira said, handing over Ava's note. Rivera skimmed, then nodded. "We don't give copies. You'll review on site." Mira sat, her hands resting on the cold table. On the screen, rows of numbers glittered like stars before rain. She filtered, narrowed, clicked each box like plucking weeds one by one. And there it was, at the bottom corner. Device ID, HC-AX4-7QZO. The ID rang familiar, like the knock on your own front door. "Can you show me this device's logins outside office hours?" she asked. Rivera arched a brow. "You know what you're touching, don't you?" "The doorknob," Mira said. "I haven't turned it yet." Rivera studied her, then gave a small laugh, the kind people make when they're tired of lies and glad to hear one honest sentence. She touched the photo on her dresser. Her mother, hair neatly pinned, smiling the smile of someone who still had to count every dollar tomorrow, but refused to stop smiling anyway. "Mom," Mira whispered, "I found the pattern again, the deviation." The next morning, Ava's message buzzed her phone. "The tech archives will open for you at 10:15. I told them you're reviewing process compliance." Ava was a master of words. In anyone else's mouth, it would sound like a request. From Ava, it sounded like a soft command. The technical floor was on 12, where the generators and chillers roared like an iron beehive. If you listened closely, it sounded almost like surf, the kind fed by electricity in invoices. The engineer on duty escorted her, his coveralls smelling of machine oil, a scent like an old oath. He pointed out the way, while Mira felt the chill of steel in the air, the kind that keeps both people and data awake. She checked the firewall, the access charts. Each click was a mote of dust in the air, and every mote had a name if you had the patience. Then she saw it. Group XCOVR, short for Exception Override. 5 accounts listed, 4 with normal flowing logs, 1 spotless like clothes straight from the store, 2 spotless to trust. "I need an export of this account's config," she said. The engineer frowned. "That usually goes through the CFO's office." Mira gave a half smile that said, "I know. That's what makes it interesting." She didn't argue. She just wrote down the device code, her file folder thickening like fresh bread rising. Leaving the tech floor, she paused in the hallway, listening to the machines breathe through the walls like the earth itself exhaling. They seemed to say, "Don't be afraid. The earth is an old machine, but it knows how to bear the noise of men." Back on 37, Jackson was waiting. 2 paper cups sat on his desk, one steaming, one cold. "You take the hot one," he said. "I'll keep the cold." "Coffee is coffee," Mira replied. "The difference is in the trust." Neither of them smiled. They each lifted a cup, sitting across from one another like chess players who knew the match would outlast lunch. Mira laid out what she had found. The cleanup temp script that popped up right on cue. The account too clean to be real. Jackson listened, never once tossing in an "I thought so" or showing off what he knew. His listening was like opening a window for air, silent but useful. "Do you have a name in mind?" he asked finally. "I don't guess," Mira said. "Guessing names is like buying a lottery ticket. If you win, you brag. If you lose, you burn money. I prefer math." Jackson slid a folder across. "My hires from the past 2 years. Read if you want. Some changes I thought were smart then. Now I'm not so sure." Mira skimmed quickly. The name Vincent Harmon flashed by like a silver fish. Sleek, shiny, hard to hold. Her mind filled with hallway gossip, optimization decisions, layoffs dressed up with polite terms like resource liberation. She reminded herself, beauty isn't always health. Neon light isn't moonlight. Late in the afternoon, an off-season rain whipped across the city. Glass steps puckered like goose flesh. People on the street hunched up like embarrassed cats. High above, the rain drummed against the windows, making a chorus of frog-like percussion. Toke, toke, toke. Mira wore her headphones but skipped the music, letting the rain score the columns of numbers. In the sound of rain, everything seemed more honest, because rain never feels ashamed. She stitched together a timeline. Every Trinox withdrawal, every keystroke, every second of the script. Then she overlaid it with the finance department's meeting schedule. A perfect line appeared. Each time the CFO's office held a general meeting, the little withdrawals fluttered away like a flock of sparrows. Good hunters don't shoot eagles. They shoot sparrows, plentiful, forgettable, but sparrows always leave feathers. Mira pulled out her phone. She texted Jackson, "I have a trail." Seconds later, "Keep going." By night, the office was only her and the whisper of rain. Ava messaged, "Don't stay up too late. Tomorrow you'll need to be quiet, but deep." Mira replied, "Deep means cold." Ava typed back, "But at the bottom there's always rock to stand on." Women have a way of telling each other, "Don't be afraid. I'm here," without ever saying it outright. Noah woke once more, asking for water. Mira carried him on her hip, patting his back, listening to the tiny clogged sound of his breath, like leaves brushing in the wind. She told herself, "If I fail tomorrow, at least tonight my boy will sleep well." That's the philosophy of people with no stake in million-dollar meetings. Their victory is measured in small peace, not fireworks. Thursday morning, the halls of Helix smelled of fresh oranges from the cleaning crew, scrubbing as though preparing for dignitaries. In truth, they were preparing for rumors. And rumors, dear reader, are the fastest currency in any office economy. No banks needed, only mouths. Mira passed through, catching snippets, investigation, audit, CFO. She kept her steps steady, not fast, not slow, like someone carrying a bowl of water, determined not to spill a drop. In the playroom, Noah sat with the caregiver, chewing on applesauce. He bit the spoon like a tiny philosopher contemplating the sharp edges of life. Mira kissed his forehead quickly, then returned to her desk. On her screen, the data map had taken shape like a river. She named it in her head, Ink River. Each Tranox payment was a small dam. Stealing water meant for the fields. Jackson called her into his office. His room glowed softly. No trophies on the walls, only a black and white photo. A still lake, a lone boat in the center. "See?" Mira asked. "Lake," Jackson said, "from long ago. The past needs few words, silence fills in the rest." He pointed to a chair. "Ava set up what you asked for. You can review 6 months of access changes." Mira opened the logs. Data flowed like a June rainstorm. At line 19, she stopped. A temporary override granted to the CFO's assistant, justification listed as preparing internal audit for the quarter. The timing matched the very first Trinox payment. A chill brushed her skin. Not fear, justice sprouting, a rare tree rarely tended. "What do you see?" Jackson asked. "A detonation point," Mira said. "Not big, but enough to shred a tire." She gathered the documents, sealed them in a thick plastic sleeve. "I want to cross-check with security device logs. If the same device approved these, we have a fingerprint." "Do it," Jackson said. And thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Mira replied. "So far I've only seen the shadow on the water, not the hand holding the oar." The security floor sat beside the elevator control hub. There, the beep of key cards pulsed steady like the heartbeat of the building. The supervisor was a woman with curly hair, named Rivera, eyes sharp as pins. "What do you need?" "Device logs from financial approvals," Mira said, handing over Ava's note. Rivera skimmed, then nodded. "We don't give copies. You'll review on site." Mira sat, her hands resting on the cold table. On the screen, rows of numbers glittered like stars before rain. She filtered, narrowed, clicked each box like plucking weeds one by one. And there it was, at the bottom corner. Device ID, HC-AX4-7QZO. The ID rang familiar, like the knock on your own front door. "Can you show me this device's logins outside office hours?" she asked. Rivera arched a brow. "You know what you're touching, don't you?" "The doorknob," Mira said. "I haven't turned it yet." Rivera studied her, then gave a small laugh, the kind people make when they're tired of lies and glad to hear one honest sentence. "In the last 5 weeks, that device was active 3 times after 9 p.m. The latest was last week, 9:43 p.m. Mira jotted it down. "Thank you. You've given me one side of the coin." "And the other side?" "I'll ask the numbers," Mira said. "They tell the truth if you don't bully them." By the time she returned upstairs, the rain had stopped. The smell of damp asphalt rose, like the breath of an elephant fresh from a bath. In the glass playroom, Noah slept with a stuffed giraffe clutched tight. By now the giraffe practically had its own Helix passport. Mira pressed a hand against her chest and drew a deep breath. "You might think it was a melodrama. I'd say this: anyone walking a tightrope has to check if their lungs still work." She sat down and fit the last piece into place. The late-night logins. The Trinox withdrawals happening 12 to 18 minutes later. Just enough time for an espresso in a single click. HC-AX4-7QZ. A string of letters and numbers that felt like a license plate you've seen before but can't remember where. She flipped through the employee register Jackson had lent her, scanning the list of devices assigned to senior management. When she reached the CFO's page, she stopped. Small type. Auxiliary device. AX4-7QZ, side office. Side office. In life, serious trouble often starts with that word. Side. A side room in a marriage. A side account in a bank. And here, a side device for a man at the top. Mira didn't celebrate. She knew this was just the lantern flare before the storm. But she didn't despair either. No one's truly lost if they can still see their own footprints. She sealed the evidence, labeled it. For now, call it a fingerprint. Ava entered without knocking. "Have you eaten dinner?" "No," Mira admitted. "But you just brought it." Ava raised a paper box. "Chicken soup. They say chicken heals wounds. Not sure if it works on greed." "Greed isn't a wound," Mira sighed. "It's a beast that knows how to change skins." "Then eat, so you're strong enough to fight it," Ava said softly. In her eyes flickered a light, neither soft nor hard, the kind of light that belongs to someone standing safely on the shore, yet ready to jump if needed. That evening, Jackson sent a single line. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. No place, no subject." Mira read it and understood everything. There would be a meeting, and already the air in the hallways smelled different. She went home, bathed Noah, making sure her little boy didn't carry office dust into his dreams. Warm water slid through his baby hair, and Noah laughed, kicking like a small fish. Mira thought, if life is a card game, I may only hold a single ace, but when he laughs, it feels like enough to bet everything. That night, she sat at the kitchen table under the yellow bulb. Outside, a mechanic's neon sign flickered like the eye of a drunk. She opened her notebook and wrote a few lines to her future self. "If tomorrow's wind blows hard, remember you've lived in storms before. Don't forget how to hold your child and how to hold the truth." She closed the notebook, blew out the small candle. The room fell into a darkness as gentle as the palm of a hand. Morning. Helix was as still as a church before Mass. Ava led Mira down a little-used hallway. On the walls, abstract paintings looked like drunken clouds drifting. "Jackson wants you close," Ava said, "but he also wants you unseen." "Thank you," Mira replied. "I'm used to places where no one looks." Ava smiled. People forget those places are the best for seeing clearly. In the small waiting room beside the boardroom, Mira sat listening to the air conditioning hum like a distant folk song. The sealed folder lay before her, her hand resting on it like a librarian guarding a rare book. Through the wall came the muted rhythm of footsteps. Jackson appeared in the doorway, freshly shaven, eyes glinting cold. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready since my son drank his bottle last night," Mira said, her voice light, her words simple as tying a shoelace. He nodded. No luck wished, no slogans spoken. Both knew luck is something prepared by hand, not by mouth. He took the folder from her. When his fingers brushed the paper, Mira heard the faintest rustle, the sound of something shifting shape in the air. It could have been trust, or it could have been a storm. "After this," Jackson said quietly, "everything will get loud." "Noise," Mira replied, "is sometimes just the truth being forced to raise its voice." Jackson held her gaze for a second, then turned away. The door closed, leaving a Mira alone with the chair, the wall, and her heartbeat. Not fast, not slow, steady as the stride of someone who knows the road is rough but has already chosen to walk it. She leaned back, inhaled deep. This day had chosen her long ago, perhaps the moment her finger slipped on a single digit. Some mistakes, dear listener, carry God's initials at the bottom. Mira glanced at the clock. The minute hand slid over 12 like a sparrow landing on a wire. She closed her eyes for a moment, picturing Noah staging battles with his giraffe, Ava running the kitchen like a general, Rivera down in security watching screens as if they were constellations. The whole city felt like a guitar with old strings that still carried sound. And somewhere, Trinox, that colorless name, was waiting to hear the verdict from the numbers it thought it had already bought. The door swung open. Jackson returned silent. He rested his hand on the back of the chair opposite her, as if needing support outside himself. "It's time, he said. "Let the truth walk into the room before we do." Mira stood, picked up her pen, the most faithful ally of anyone who doubts. She straightened her blazer, smoothed her hair, and smiled at her own reflection in the blurred glass of a frame. "Let's go." She followed Jackson down the corridor, each step carrying the scent of fresh paper, bitter coffee, leftover rain, and a hint of thunder waiting to break. If you've ever sat in a boardroom so polished that even a throat clearing echoes like a church bell, you'll know how Mira Jensen felt that morning. The long table gleamed like a mirror, the leather chairs so plush they made you feel you'd already mortgaged your life to the company just by sitting. The overhead lights shone cold and white, etching every anxious line. This was a room built less for honest debate than for intimidation. Jackson entered first, his shirt buttoned to the collar as if he were about to preach a sermon. His step was calm, but his eyes carried a weight, like a man who had buried grief deep, yet it still leaked at the corners. Minutes later, Vincent Harmon arrived. The CFO wore a polished grin, a navy suit pressed sharp, and a red tie blazing like a warning flare. He walked into the room as though he owned it, his cologne swallowing the air. Mira wasn't inside. She sat in the adjoining room, watching through the monitor, Noah asleep in the playroom nearby. Her heart pounded, each beat a hammer on a table. She knew today wasn't just about numbers. It was a chess game, and the loser would vanish from the board. Jackson opened, his voice as steady as a slow drum. "Vincent, we need to speak plainly." Vincent crossed his arms, leaned back. "I always speak plainly, Jackson. But make it quick. I've got a company to run." The evidence was laid out. Jackson slid the printouts across the table. Suspicious payments, logs, a script named Cleanup Temp. Each word he spoke was like a stone dropped into a lake, ripples spreading outward. Watching from the screen, Mira thought she had never seen him so calm. Vincent laughed, short and sharp, sour as orange peel. "What an entertaining little play. A single mother with a few auditing skills spins a conspiracy in your head. But do you know what the board wants, Jackson? They want profit, and I deliver profit." Mira's fists clenched. The scorn stung her ears like cold water. But she remembered her mother's words. Truth doesn't need to shout. She breathed slow, waiting for Jackson to answer. The chairman lifted his head, voice steady. "Profit can blind men, but trust is what keeps the house from falling." Vincent leaned forward, a crooked smile on his face. "Trust? You think shareholders buy stock with trust? They buy it with the green of the dollar. And they know who puts money in their pockets." The air in the room thickened. Rain hammered the windows suddenly, as if it wanted to join the argument. Jackson stayed calm. He recounted shady numbers, payments tucked deep in the accounts. Vincent shook his head, parrying with polished words. Restructuring, seasonal effect. Mira wanted to scream, "That's a lie," but she bit her lip, remembering her voice would never pierce the thick glass wall. Finally, Vincent pulled a USB from his pocket and slammed it onto the table like a trump card. Here's proof of your misconduct, Jackson. Emails, invoices, everything. If I send this, the board will push you out in an hour. You've got two choices. Step down quietly or be dragged out in disgrace. And your little auditor girl gets swept away with you. Mira's chest tightened. She felt herself pulled onto the board like a pawn. But Jackson only folded his arms, voice cold. You forget one thing. I don't play chess to keep my seat. I play to keep the table. Thunder rolled outside, as if echoing his words. The boardroom door swung open. Ava Lynn entered with two security guards. Her voice didn't tremble. Mr. Harmon, your ID has been deactivated. You'll need to leave the building. Vincent's face flickered. Then he barked out a laugh. You think this ends it? I've rooted myself in this company. One day, you'll pay the price. But security stepped forward. Vincent rose, his red tie drooping like a fallen flag. He stormed out, leaving behind the bitter stench of cologne. The door closed. Silence stretched. Jackson sat down, steel in his eyes. He looked up at the surveillance screen where Mira was watching. You see, he said softly. This is only the beginning. Mira leaned back, drawing a deep breath. Fear and pride knotted inside her. She knew the road ahead was jagged, but she also knew she was no longer alone. The days that followed were a storm. Rumors spread faster than wind, whispers in the halls, reporters hovering at the doors. Mira became a whispered name. The woman who found Trinox. She didn't like the curious stares, but she accepted them. That was the cost of truth. In her small office, she kept digging, gathering more evidence. Noah remained her anchor. His laughter kept her from sliding into despair. Jackson rarely spoke, but his eyes carried trust, steady as a lantern. One night, he paused at her door and said quietly, "Thank you for not running." Mira looked up, voice barely a breath. "I've run from many things, not this time." In the days after the showdown, Helix Core felt like a simmering pot, lid clamped down, but steam hissing through the cracks. Employees whispered. Reporters lurked. The board split into factions. Everyone knew something big had happened behind the glass doors, but no one dared say it aloud. And at the center of the whirlpool was Mira Jensen, a single mother who once only wished for enough formula for her child. Now her name carried the label whistleblower, though she'd never blown any whistle except to lull her son to sleep with clumsy notes. She still arrived every morning, stroller in hand. The only difference now was the nods and stares that followed her. Some colleagues smiled supportively. Others looked at her as if she'd tossed a grenade into the office. She was used to it. When you've sat in a dark apartment, holding a hungry baby with no money for formula, the eyes of strangers can't make your hands tremble anymore. Noah became the little star of the 37th floor. Each time he laughed, the whole office seemed to shed its weight. To Mira, he was living proof that truth was worth the fight. And Jackson, he appeared less often, but each time he stopped by her office, his gaze carried a quiet promise. Amid the storms, Mira felt in those eyes a vow still unspoken. One afternoon, Ava called her in. "Mr. Albright wants you to prepare a full report. We're going public with the internal investigation." Mira nodded. She knew this wasn't just paperwork. This was the final blow to Vincent and his allies. She worked late into the nights, eyes burning from the screen, but hands relentless. She traced every log, tied each fragment of evidence, weaving the chaos into a clear score of data. In those quiet nights, sometimes she remembered the empty formula can on her kitchen counter. Once it had been the symbol of failure. Now it was the very desperation that had led her here. When the report was done, she handed it to Jackson. He read slowly, his eyes sweeping each page. At last, he looked up. "You've done what an entire audit department couldn't do in 2 years." Mira's voice carried a touch of dry humor. "Maybe because I had nothing to lose, except the truth." Jackson was silent a moment, then nodded. "Exactly. And that's what makes you trustworthy." On the day the report was made public, the boardroom was packed. The directors sat in rigid rows, journalists pressed against the doors, employees holding their breath. Jackson began, his voice clear and steady. "We were betrayed by the very man entrusted to guard our finances. But thanks to a new employee, the truth has been revealed." Every eye turned toward Mira. She rose, folder in hand, her heart pounding like a drum. She spoke with clarity, laying out each illegal transfer, every log and trace, every piece of undeniable evidence. She didn't need flowery words. The truth had its own light. When she finished, the room fell silent. Then came applause, not from all, but enough to echo. The media swarmed like bees to honey. The first headline went live: "Single Mother Exposes Multi-Million-Dollar Fraud at Helix Core." Photos of her leaving the building, Noah in hand, spread everywhere. Mira had never liked the flash of cameras, but this time she couldn't hide. And surprisingly, instead of fear, she felt pride. She was no longer the woman begging for $50 to buy formula. She was the woman who defended the truth. But victory didn't erase the shadows. One late night, Mira received a strange message. "You think you've won?" Vincent isn't finished. She stared at the screen, her chest tightening. The past had taught her. Men like him rarely let go easily. But this time, instead of panic, she saved the message and forwarded it to Ava and Jackson. "If he wants to come back, we'll be waiting." Jackson came to see her the very next day. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said. "Vincent may have money and connections, but he doesn't have what we have, daylight." Mira met his gaze. "You once told me you don't believe in charity, only in investment. So what am I to you? An investment?" Jackson's smile was faint, almost tender. "Number, you're a partner, and Noah is the future we have to protect." Time moved on. Helix Core began to heal. Trust returned, stocks climbed. Mira was offered the position of Director of Internal Audit. She accepted, not for the title, but for the chance to build a system that could not be bent. Every morning she entered the office with Noah in her arms, gratitude and resolve walking side by side. One afternoon, Jackson summoned her to the top floor. The room glowed with sunset, the city below painted in crimson and gold. He handed her a folder. "This is a new project," he said. "I want you involved from the start." Inside was the blueprint for a fund to support single mothers working in technology. Mira's heart clenched. She looked up and met Jackson's eyes. What she saw there was no longer just trust. It was something deeper, fragile, yet enduring. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I know," he replied, "but I want to. Because one day, Noah will ask why his mother stayed. And I want him to have the right answer." That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Mira sat on the balcony of her new apartment, watching the city glow. Her phone buzzed. A message appeared, a screenshot of the very first text she'd sent by mistake. Beneath it, Jackson had written, "An accident led us here." "I don't believe in coincidence," Mira laughed, tears rolling down her cheeks. She typed back, Maybe the universe recruits better than HR. A minute later, there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, Jackson stood there. No tie, no files. Just a man, his eyes weary but warm. "Mira," he said simply, "I want you and Noah in my life. Not as employees, as family, if you're ready." Mira looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. The door closed behind them, and a new chapter opened. Months later, in a grand hall, Mira stepped to the podium. This time not to expose corruption, but to introduce the fund for single mothers. Her voice was steady. "I once believed my life was defined by failures, but then a mistyped number opened a door. Sometimes the smallest mistake can lead us exactly where we belong." The hall erupted in applause. In the front row, Jackson sat with Noah in his lap, waving at his mother. Mira smiled, feeling the fullness of the moment. From an empty formula can in a dark kitchen to the brilliance of the stage lights, the journey had been a lifetime long, but every step worth it. And somewhere, I like to think, Mark Twain would be laughing, saying, "A single wrong digit can lead you astray, but sometimes getting lost is how you find home."